Okay, so when we look at the rights in education, there are four main groups that are useful for us. Firstly, following rules, as all public bodies should. Secondly, rules on equal treatment, primarily under the Equality Act, with important limitations. Thirdly, rules on quality and competence in teaching. And fourthly, school class sizes, important issue practically. So first, there's a group of cases that universities and other educational establishments have to follow the rules that bind them, including their own rules if they make them. So a good starting example is Clark and the University of Lincolnshire and Humberside. Here Clark had done a paper on a streetcar named Desire, had been accused of plagiarism, had been graded 0, but had been offered a resit. Under Regulation 654, it said that when you did a resit, your grade should not normally go above a third class mark. However, the student was only allowed to get a maximum of a third class degree. And she claimed that this was a breach of contract and also brought judicial review. The Court of Appeal said that the claim should not be struck out. And although it was over 3 months, which is the normal period for judicial review, the time was extended so as to, according to Lord Justice Sedley, not stifle the claim on procedural grounds. The court says that yes, the university had to follow its own rules. It doesn't decide whether it was appropriate for the student to get a third class degree. It would go back to first instance. But the important point for our purposes is that, first of all, the university is both a public body and also is bound by contractual rules. So that's the first point. And the second point is that the court is very clear that it shouldn't involve itself with issues that involve making academic judgments, but does require that the university's own rules should be followed. So it should be possible, at least in principle, even though it's not finally decided, for the student to get more than a third class degree, given that the rules themselves said it shouldn't normally go above a third class, but that left open that possibility. Another case is called Persord at the University of Cambridge, or the Crown and Persord and the University of Cambridge. And here we were looking at a PhD student who was doing a PhD in astronomy, and they brought judicial review after their graduate status was withdrawn. Their complaint was based on several things, but one of the main ones was that they weren't given a chance to make representations before having their graduate status revoked, and they also alleged that the Board of Graduate Studies hadn't properly read the materials that had been submitted by Persord in bringing the complaint. Lord Justice Chadwick said that the board had acted unfairly, quashed the decision, and it needs to go back for a rehearing and a proper response on whether or not the materials have been read. It's also possible, instead of going to court, to complain to the Office of Independent Adjudicator for Higher Education and Practice. This should result in a much quicker, faster remedy for any student if it can't be resolved properly by the university in the first place. Then we've got a group of rules on equality. So the Equality Act 2010 says that there has to be equality of access and treatment at any university on protected grounds. The difficulty is, or the real problem is, that those protected grounds are sex, race, sexual orientation, age, disability, but it doesn't include the all-important thing, which is the elephant in the room for discrimination and equal treatment in the case of university access, which is a protected ground of wealth, or a protected ground of income and parents' income. What the Equality Act doesn't do is it doesn't address the main thing that causes inequality at universities, which is that some people have a lot more money and other people have a lot less. There are duties for disabled students. Under the Equality Act, there's a duty to make reasonable adjustments if you've got a long-term medically recognised condition, to ensure that everybody can participate and get the most out of their education on an equal basis. It's worth just saying a little bit more about the absence of rules on wealth and income discrimination. So when we look at most universities, but let's just take Cambridge and Oxford. In the case of Cambridge, 27.4% of home undergraduate students came from a private school background. It was 32.4% in Oxford in 2023, even though 6% of the UK population attends private school. Different picture for international students, and it's going to be different depending on the university and the type of degree. 23% of undergraduates were international students, 65% of postgraduates were international students. But the big thing that we don't have is any data on the private school background of international students. And so that means that if we are genuinely interested in equal treatment, and like the international covenants says that universities should be accessible on the basis of merit, the lack of statistics is worrying. But we do know from UK data that state school students are likely to outperform private school students over the course of their degree by a statistically significant margin of 4%. And what that tells us is that when people have been to private school, they have had more resources invested in their education. Once they get to a level playing field with other students from state schools at university, that advantage disappears. But more importantly, to put it, the real point, it means that state school students aren't being invested enough at school level, but also that the fact that universities like Cambridge or Oxford or indeed King's or anywhere else that have so many more private school students suggests that there is an over-recruitment compared to state school students that would do or do better over time. And we know that large university fees also put up another discriminatory barrier of deterring applications. So we've got a number of different empirical studies, Callender and Jackson and Hoover, all make out this point. Then we've got standards surrounding quality of teaching. So variety of cases. First one, if teaching is really bad, it should be the case that it doesn't go to court. And indeed, the first case here, Austin, was a reported case in the newspapers where Austin won a settlement of £30,000 when they attended Wolverhampton Law School, and the law lecturers didn't turn up. The library was understocked, and the university completely failed to take the complaint seriously. So Austin won a settlement. Most cases, however, are not egregious as the Wolverhampton Law School case was. Abramova and Ox ILP was a case where the claimant lost completely. Apparently, the claimant was prepared to blame anyone but herself for getting poor grades, so it wasn't about the quality of the teaching at all, in Justice Burnett's view. Another similar case is Siddiqui at the University of Oxford. Quite funny, this was about a history student who got a perfectly respectable degree of an upper second class and still wasn't happy. They claimed that if they had been given better teaching, then they would have had a better chance of getting into Harvard or Yale Law School. So Justice Foskett held that it was not established at all, the teaching in Oxford history supervisions was inadequate, the claim failed entirely on its merits, the claim was not made out, no proof that the teaching was negligent. But the important point as well that Justice Foskett makes is that there's got to be a better way of dealing with this kind of issue than litigation. So if there is a problem with standards, then the best way to raise standards is probably through more investment in teaching, ensuring that class sizes are smaller, not through sort of losing gain for everyone and very costly litigation. Then we come to school class sizes. So we could talk about university class sizes, but there are no rules on university class sizes. Perhaps there should be. But what we do have is some rules on school class sizes. But unfortunately, these schools are very, very, very relaxed. There is a limit of 30 students in school classes, which the Secretary of State can amend. and that's been the case since the School Standards and Framework Act of 1998. But that's been pretty much the same standard for the number of people in school classes for about a century or more. In fact, the numbers often go over this. So, and it's worse in nurseries. So, if we look at nurseries, the UK had 34.6 students per teacher in nurseries, 19.62 in primary schools, 17.71 in secondary schools, and this was among the worst set of results in the OECD, between the worst and third worst. The Department for Education in 2019 found that there were 27 pupils to students in primary schools, 21 in secondary schools. And this really matters because the empirical evidence pretty consistently shows the positive benefits of smaller class sizes. And the problems that all of these things come back to is just the lack of funding, the lack of investment in education across the board, and the lack of attempt from a government to take a holistic picture of the whole education system. And that's why many people have been calling for a new national education service to take a combined approach to education from nursery level through primary, secondary, tertiary, university education, adult life learning. But we don't have a national education service yet, unlike the National Health Service that we will be doing next.